We're going to have a look at the R7, the world's first intercontinental ballistic missile. Have a quick look at it first. Looks very familiar. And we're going to address that in a minute, actually. But we're just going to have a little bit of history. Let's just have a quick peek what it says here. The R-7 was a Soviet missile developed during the Cold War and the world's first intercontinental ballistic missile. Okay. Yeah, we'll come back. Let's just look at some statistics. Got an article here, but what I'm really interested in, I'll leave the links actually. I'll leave links in the description to all the stuff I'm showing you, okay? I want to look at the statistics regarding this R7. Here we are, the R7. What I'm particularly interested in is the range, right at the bottom there. Oh, sorry about that, range in kilometers. Let's say 8,000, it says 8 to 8.5, or in some cases 9 to 14 kilometers. So quite a big distance. So pretty impressive. Now I'm over the Cold War Museum website, which discusses these rocket launches in the late 50s, early 60s. Discusses the locations and the target. I'll just read here. It's in the bottom. Like I say, I'm going to leave a link for everything so you can have a little gander yourself if you're interested. The Soviet ICBM test project involved launching missiles from Plesetsk, which is number 1 there on the map. Kapustin Yar, number 2. I'm not sure if I got that right. Number 3, Baikonur, which is on the bottom there. And all of these went to number 4. So essentially these R-7 rockets were being tested and fired from this massive distance from one side of Russia to the other, to this location number 4, which is here noted as the Kalitchi test range, which essentially turns out to be the Kura test range. The Kalitchi bit is the nearest town, which actually is a military town. There's a lot of military on that island. Other than that, it's extremely deserted. Hence, it's used as a ballistic missile test range. You wouldn't have a load of people living there, obviously. Okay. So let's. So we've got that as well there. We've got that reference from the past, discussing these old rockets, like the R-7, being launched. Now, what's really interesting is location 1 on the map and 3 are still used. Location 1 is the Plesetsk Space Center. Location 3, of course, is the Baikonur Space Center, which are both in use today, okay? I'm over at the Russian Defense Policy website. You gotta love the tag here. Strategic fireworks. Dear oh dear, talk about it in your face. We've got impact craters here from the Kura test range. Okay. Let's have a quick look. Being practically the eve of Victoria Day, news is hard to come by. I'm not quite sure what that's regarding. Right, Novaya Gazeta. I presume that's a paper. However, it was nice enough to print an interesting article about Russia's strategic shooting gallery, the Kura test range. The author says, from the air, this 13,206 square kilometre patch of Tiaga looks like an unattractive golf course with a great quantity of holes. In Kura's 55-year history, more than 5,500 items have landed here. Kura was called Kama at its time of establishment in 1955, and 2 years later, the first missile, an R-7, the world's first ICBM, landed here. Why this site? Oh, excuse me. Why this site? An old hand at the Independent Scientific Station of Space Forces explains. There are several reasons for this site. Firstly, it's one of the most remote regions. That is, it's possible to test missiles here, not only for firing accuracy, but for range. Secondly, the trajectory of all flights was conducted only over the USSR's territory. Thirdly, the range was laid out at a great distance from populated points and airline routes. Essentially, we get a little thing on the map there. Okay, I've got another article to have a quick look at. Another quick article. And then I'll show you where I'm going with all this, okay? Just basically kind of says the same sort of thing. Just some different images. Not an easy place to get images of, as you can imagine. Okay, right, let's get with it. Now, where I'm going with all this, and you heard me mention just now, the R7 looks extremely familiar, doesn't it? Anyone got it yet? Yeah, it's the fucking Soyuz rocket. So it turns out the R7, which is essentially the first intercontinental ballistic missile, is the father of the Soyuz rocket. So we're looking at the Soyuz rocket now, and of course it looks just like that intercontinental missile. Very similar. Obviously a slightly updated one. We were looking at Cold War, i.e. the first ever missile with the R7. But it actually tells us here. Family here at the bottom, the Soyuz rocket is part of the R7 family, which, as we've seen, is an intercontinental ballistic missile from the Cold War. Now, I found that really, really interesting. And that got my mind ticking over. And I came up with this. Most of these rockets, these Russian rockets, Soyuz rockets, take off from the Baikonur Space Center. Now, under its flight path, where all this space junk gets landed, there's a hell of a lot of stories online about the locals, and obviously pictures as well, about the villagers with these boosters and rockets and space junk. This is in the Altai mountain region, okay? Very, very remote country. And there's lots of images and stories here of the issues with these space junk and these boosters landing in these very remote regions. Now I've mapped the 2 points of reference here, Baikonur and the Altai region, where all this space junk sort of landing, and I've sort of squiggled in red. And I've continued that straight line on. And sure enough, it goes straight to the intercontinental ballistic test range known as Kura, which, strangely enough, the Soyuz's father used to go there and explode. So isn't that strange that the Soyuz rocket, which essentially is an intercontinental ballistic missile, according to Wiki, because its dad, the R7, was. Isn't it strange that it goes on exactly the same path that the R7 did back in the Cold War days, when it headed to Kura to explode in the test range? Now, isn't that strange? I find that so revealing. And you can't make this stuff up. So essentially, the Soyuz rocket, which is branched off and developed from the R-7, the first intercontinental ballistic missile, which used to do this route that I'm showing you in tests in the 60s. It would seem the Soyuz is doing exactly the same route, dumping its boosters in the Altai region. And if it continues on in a straight line, it's heading straight for the test range at Kura, where no doubt, we looked at some of those pictures just now, some holes in the ground and some smashed up buildings. If it is, it's more than likely just hitting the ground there, in that incredibly remote area, as they've told us, and just destroying a building. No doubt that end of the Russia, they'll call it a ballistic test. It's just all the pieces are just falling together. I'm not going to make any claims. I'm just highlighting what I found just having a little look at this stuff, and just the fact that that is in a straight line to the test range. The fact it's all remote regions, they've already told us. The fact the Soyuz comes from the intercontinental ballistic missile, which did exactly the same route to the test missile range. I just find that incredibly revealing. So I've got to ask you, is the Soyuz rocket nothing more than an intercontinental, or just basically a long-range theatrical pantomime missile? Is it? If it is, at least the Russians get a bit of fun out of it. They get to blow up a bit of stuff the other end of the journey, rather than the American rockets seemingly ending up in the drink. You tell me.